Welcome back to another episode of the Todd Durkin Impact Show. This is Todd Durkin, and this is going to be one of the most impactful episodes ever. Pardon the pun, but we talk about impact. Impact's all about living a life worth telling a story about. Impact is about legacy. Impact is about challenging you to live a life based on purpose and deep meaning. And my friends, today, the story that you are going to hear is going to certainly be emotional. It's going to be deep. One of the deepest conversations I've ever had on over 128 episodes. It's the story of a man named Philip Lutzenkirchen, and it's from his father, Mike Lutzenkirchen. Now, Mike is the father of the late Philip Lutzenkirchen. He's a former Auburn University student athlete from 2009 to 2012. Since Philip's passing in 2014, Mike has served as the executive director of the Lutzie 43 Foundation, has made it his mission in life to carry out Philip's legacy. Prior to starting the Lutzie 43 Foundation, Mike's career in sales management, and marketing included positions with Macmillan Publishing and IBM. He was born and raised in Wheaton, Illinois, a Chicago area suburb, and now resides in Marietta, Georgia, with his wife of 34 years, Mary. And together they have three daughters, Amy, Ann, and Abby. Mike's delivered 400 plus Philip's Legacy talks and talks about what legacy are you leaving. My friends, when you hear the story of Philip Lutzenkirchen, a standout student athlete from Auburn, and his life and what he did, you are going to be a better mom and dad, a better husband or wife, or a better child, a better student, a better athlete because of the story of Philip Lutzenkirchen. Without further ado, let's hop over to Philip's father, Mike, and listen to this amazing story. All right, my friends, I am at Fitness Quest 10, and I have Mike Lutzenkirchen on the line. Mike, how are you today down in Marietta, Georgia?
Hey, Todd, I'm doing great. I appreciate you speaking to me today and let me share our story of our son, Philip, and the Lutzie 43 Foundation.
Yeah, I appreciate you for sharing it. Folks, as I mentioned in the introduction, you're in for a real treat today. And I'm going to mention this before I even hear the whole story. I want you to make sure that if you have kids, you have your kids listening today. If you are a coach, that you have your athletes listening. And if you're a mom or you're a dad, that you just have tremendous gratitude today. So you know on this, Mike, when you talk about your son, Philip, I was out with my wife this morning and I was getting my workout in. We were going for a walk around the neighborhood and I was listening to several different videos and the story of your son, Philip. And man, oh man, I want to just say what an amazing thing you're doing now with your foundation in honor of Philip. So thank you for that. And I'd love to hear more about Philip. Who was Philip and why is there a foundation in his honor? When you talk about Philip Lutzenkirchen, love that name, by the way, a good German name. Who was Philip Lutzenkirchen?
Yeah, so Philip, we're blessed. I told you, Scott, I've been married 35 years. My wife, Mary, we met in second grade in Wheaton, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. And we had so many things that were just in sync with one another, the things that you don't even have to think about, Mm-hmm. Fell in love with her early on. We ended up going to the same high school. Mary's Catholic, we're Catholic, didn't have to think about anything like that. So it made it very easy. Blessed to have four children. I've got three daughters and Philip. Mm-hmm. Philip is the third of the four, so two older sisters and one younger sister. We moved to Marietta, Georgia when Philip was 5, and he was always big for his age. But I would tell you he was a mama's boy, man. He loved Mary, still loves Mary from heaven, but he also showed great respect towards his sisters. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have to pull some of my girls together at times when they were younger and say, hey, if you keep poking at them and prodding them, I can't stop you from them jumping on you at some point and taking you out and taking care of you. But he's been raised not to do that to girls. But again, specifically my daughter, Ann, would just poke him all the time and prod him. But he was just a big, gentle giant of a kid. He loved sports early on. We're kind of a tunnel vision family, if you will, loving sports. A lot of athletes in our family. 3 of the 4 kids were Division I athletes. And Phil was just this big giant of a kid.
So was that in Marietta or back where you're from in Wheaton, Illinois? where you
So
grew
we
up.
moved from when Philip was about 2.5 years old from Wheaton to Carmel, Indiana. So we started making our way south.
Okay.
At the time I was with IBM, and when Philip was 5 years old, we moved down to Marietta, Georgia. So he essentially, all of our kids essentially have grown up Southern.
Yeah.
And he met a family the first day we moved in, the Penner family with 4 boys, and he started playing youth football a week later.
What high school did Philip go to?
Philip went to Lassiter High School here in Marietta.
Okay. A lot of people don't know this. I actually went to massage therapy school outside of Marietta in a place called Dunwoody, Georgia. At the time, it was New Life Institute and Rising Spirit Institute. Now I believe they've been bought up, but I know that area well. I loved that whole area. In 1995, I would have lived there if I didn't go back to play football overseas. So when my friend Scott Costner told me about you recently, he's like, you got to get, Mike Lutzenkirchen on the podcast. He's got an amazing story with his son, Philip. And I was like, Scott, tell me about it. And man, that was the beginning of, today's really the first time we've discussed the story of your son. So he goes to school. He's at high school in Marietta, highly recruited.
Highly recruited, 4-star, All-American. I don't know how Scott, quite frankly, they do all this, or I'm sorry, Todd, but he was voted to have the best hands of any high school football player his senior year. He had already committed to Auburn, but we made our way out to the West Coast, and he did trips out to Stanford and Cal and schools like that. But he really wanted to play in the SEC. He wanted to be close enough to home. And for your audience that, geographically challenged a little bit, traffic days, we can get faster from Marietta, Georgia, northern suburb of Atlanta, down to Auburn, Alabama, than we can get over to the University of Georgia in Athens. He had no interest in going to Georgia. He fell in love with the staff and the community there at Auburn University. He was excited about the offense they were running. So it made it very clear an easy choice for Philip to go to Auburn.
Sure. All right. So she goes to Auburn, has a standout career. Who's his quarterback? He's an H-back?
He was an H-back tight end. He was really a tight end, and he kind of made him into an H-back. I'd tell people all the time he really didn't like to block people unless it was a blindside block, and then he loved doing that. He played at about 6'4", 255 down at Auburn, but he fit in very nicely. Phil was a kid that I was able to coach him in youth sports, so in basketball, AAU, middle school basketball, and then also youth football a little bit. And he's just a kid that picks up things easy. Yeah. So in basketball, he saw plays before they developed. He just had kind of that high athletic IQ. He probably got that from his mother, quite frankly, but very coachable, and went down to Auburn and played in every game as a true freshman. Finished his career at Auburn.
He started as a true freshman?
He played in every game as a true freshman. Then he started as a sophomore. And that sophomore year was special. People that know the name Cam Newton, that's the year that Auburn won a national championship. Philip was the starting tight end H-back on that team. And he went on to be a 2-time captain his junior and senior year, and then finished his career at Auburn with more receiving touchdowns by a tight end than any other tight end in the history of the program.
Interesting. What year was that? What year did he finish there?
So he finished. I'm proud of him. He graduated 3.5 years. So he graduated in December of 2012. He considered leaving after his junior year. He got an NFL draft projection to be in a 3rd-round draft pick had he come out. He was very excited to play his senior year because he knew he was going to be a captain again. He thought he had a great opportunity to win the highest award for a tight end in college football, which is the John Mackey Award. And candidly, he was pretty excited that there was an offensive coordinator change, going to a pro-style offense under Scott Loeffler. And unfortunately, Philip had a severe left shoulder labrum tear that year going into the season. And then he tore his hip labrum in his 3rd game and ended up only playing 5 games that senior year. So he could have some surgery, try to get healthy. So instead of being a 3rd-round draft pick, he went as a free agent to the St. Louis Rams and was their last cut in fall camp there in 2013.
Mike, go back. 2-time captain. That's impressive. Regardless, I don't care if it's a Division III school. A 2-time captain is something special. What was special about Philip that allowed him to place at an SEC powerhouse like Auburn to be a 2-time captain?
Yeah, Todd, it's to me, he just picked things up. He understood the pecking order. If you, at his memorial service, which took place at Lassiter High School, which the field's been named now Lutzie 43 Field, there were 3,500 people in attendance, but of the teammates that came back, predominantly was upperclassmen. He just got down to Auburn, and he knew that, I'm a freshman. I'm arrogant or competent or whatever you want to call it, that I should start, but I also know there's a pecking order. People would tell you that he had the ability to walk into a room and no matter who else was in there, he made you feel like you were the most important person in the room. He
Mhm.
had a servant's heart. And again, I don't say it jokingly, but I do. He was blessed with many traits of his mother, and I give Mary the credit for that. But he was a captain, I think, because of how he carried himself on the field, but as importantly, off the field.
Mm. If I was to talk to Cam Newton and say the name Philip Lutzenkirchen, what do you think Cam would say about Philip?
I would think he'd say, I was only at Auburn a year. I got in there to do business on his third chance after having some mistakes elsewhere. I went there to lead a team to a national championship game. When I came in, there was a young tight end that was big and hungry and was a leader. And I think Cam would tell you that most people respected him. I think if you talk to other teammates, they'd say, hey, that year, sophomore year, Cam obviously was the biggest cheer when they would do pregame introductions of who was starting, but Philip as a tight end H-back was number 2 in
Hmm.
that cheer. And it's the way he played the game, and I think the way he carried himself.
Who was the head coach there then?
Gene Chizik.
Chiswick. What would Coach Chiswick say about Lutzie?
Well, if you go by what Gene said when he found out that we lost Philip, he'd say you shouldn't do this and have favorites as players, but of the top 5 favorite players I've ever coached,
Hmm.
Philip was certainly in there, and he's the type of young man that you'd like your daughter to marry.
Hmm. So he goes to Rams camp and gets cut. What was that like for him? He had a dream to play in the NFL, had obviously the physical and mental capacity to play at that level. He gets released. What happens then?
He got released, and I think he was one of these athletes that I see too often. I think you probably see it in your line of business. When their career ultimately ends, whether it's college or pros, and they go from being on somebody's clock on a regular basis, where to go, when to go, what to do, what to eat, how to lift, how to act, and they're now on their own. I think there's a challenge with, quite frankly, in this world with that. However, Philip wanted to play in the NFL. He gave it a shot. He would tell you, Dad, I'm hurt. I'm injured. I'm probably not fast enough now. He never felt the same after his surgeries. And he was pretty content to move on. And he moved down to Montgomery, Alabama. And he and I would laugh. I'd laugh more than he would, but he was a communication and journalism major at Auburn, and yet he got a job in wealth management. So, those conversations you try to have as a father to a son or a father to a child, it says during your college year, Phil, why don't you take a few classes in finance or at least macro and microeconomics? And his standard answer was, don't worry about it. I got it. Don't need it. And then he takes a job in wealth management. And when you got to sit for things like the Series 7 and take some pretty significant tests, almost like trying to become a CPA, I would just laugh and say, good luck. But while he was in Montgomery, a real key point, Todd, in his end of his life here, he got a chance to do some volunteer coaching at a school, St. James, private school in Montgomery, literally minutes from his office. The firm that he signed with in wealth management was fantastic. They said, Philip, get your work done. You want to go do some coaching during spring ball in the spring of 14, have at it. And that particular year, St. James had a young player that was getting recruited as a tight end at a D1 level. And Jalen actually ended up signing with Auburn, and Phil became a mentor to him. And what I love to tell people about that story is here's 2 kids that they looked alike sidewise, but as far as other than that, they were complete opposites. Philip was as white as you can be in appearance, and Jalen African-American, but these 2 guys became brothers instantly with respect of Philip being the elder down to his young student, and the student looking up to his mentor. In fact, Jalen is actually authored today in our curriculum that your audience needs to know about. We created a character development curriculum called 43 Lessons to Legacy, and we're very proud of it. But that's who Philip was. He didn't see color. He saw people. He saw hearts. He saw people that he wanted to help, and that's where he was. It was Montgomery, Alabama at the time.
Okay. Wow. So, Mike, for those who don't know the story, how did Philip pass?
So again, he started to work this career. In telling the true facts on this, Todd, is I got a phone call about 5:00 on Friday, June 27th, 2014. It was a 90 to 100 degree day here in Atlanta. Philip was calling from Montgomery. I was driving around in a van locally with my wife, and he called. And Philip and I spoke every day. And he said, "Hey, Dad, what are you up to?" I told him, "Mom and I were driving around." I said, "What do you got going on this weekend? You going to come home?" He said, "No, I'll probably just hang out in Montgomery." He was only 45 minutes from Auburn. He loved to go to Auburn. He might go to Auburn and everything. And he's at that particular time, he's like, "Dad, I'm going to get into coaching." I made the assumption that if you talked to Coach Melzon about it, who was now the head coach at Auburn, he said, "No, Dad, I'm not talking about college. I'm going to go impact kids at the high school level. I'm going to get this wealth management career going, but I'm going to do coaching." And that's the very last conversation I had with my son. And when I go out and speak across the country, Todd, I tell people all the time, we were blessed that weekend because two of our daughters came home, our older daughters. They're both living individually in separate places in Atlanta. They came home that Saturday night because Mary and I went to a charity event and brought them with. And our youngest daughter, Abby, who actually went on to play soccer at the University of Alabama, even though her brother was at Auburn, which, that's an interesting story in itself.
Right.
Abby had already had 2 ankle surgeries, and she played a semi-pro soccer game that weekend, that Saturday down in Jacksonville as part of her rehab. We went to Mass. We're Catholic. We went to our church, Transfiguration Catholic Church, that Sunday morning, which is now June 29th. We came home and there was a Post-it note on our front door. And what we learned after the fact is that a Cobb County officer sat in front of our house for about 30 minutes to deliver the message that Philip was killed. And when we weren't there, he finally left a Post-it note on the front door that said, "Please call this number." I knew the area code was LaGrange, Georgia, which is almost into Auburn as you go from Atlanta down to Auburn, Alabama. And I knew this wasn't good. My wife and I and the 2 girls made it back to our deck on the back of the house. This gorgeous morning, I called that number and I didn't get an answer. I immediately called it again and already was panic in my heart and looking at Mary and the 2 older girls. I called that number again. This time I got a live voice, and that live voice said, "Sir, I need you to call another number." And I pressed him and said, "I'm not calling another number. Tell me what's going on here." And in between that call, I said to the girls, Amy and Ann, our older girls, "Where's Philip at?" And they said, "Dad, we don't know what he did this weekend." And he was going to hang out in Auburn. And that was very odd right there because our kids really had great tabs on where everybody was. And I called that number that he gave me, the second number. And this time, as I look back, it was the coroner, Troup County. He did his job as well as he could have. He just said, "Mike, Mr. Lutzenkirchen," when you could say my last name clean, I knew that something terrible had happened and it involved Philip. He said there was an accident last night and Philip was killed. That's how we learned of Philip's passing. What we've learned after the fact was that Philip was invited by about 12 other kids we had never met. People ask me all the time, was I upset that Philip was with kids that I hadn't met? And I said, no, because you know what? Philip was a pretty well-known guy, and he opened up to everybody, and people just wanted him around, and he chose and hung around with people of good character. But what they did, he was told, was, "Philip, a bunch of us are going to arrive at a farm in LaGrange, Georgia, in a rural area, about 9-10 o'clock Saturday morning. We're going to stay till about 5 o'clock at night. There's not a lot around, so bring what you want to eat and drink. We're going to ride horses. We're going to go mudding," something that's popular in the South. I've never done it, quite frankly. I don't get thrilled pushing a truck out of mud. But the last picture we saw of my son was true Philip. He was getting ready to kiss the side of the horse, head of a horse, right on the cheek. And then we saw a video that one of his friends that he had met was in the back of a pickup truck videotaping from his phone, Philip and another guy pushing this truck called mudding. And then these kids started to drink during the day. It led into a lot of drinking. It led into them getting into an SUV, 4 kids. Philip found himself in the back of the vehicle at 2:30 in the morning because the driver wanted to go to the only rural area, 24/7 gas station, and he got himself a can of dip. Got back in the vehicle. Police made me re-watch a video recording of that young man walking into the store. All these kids were 23 years old, 21 years old. And all I can assume then is that they were speeding because the accident report said that the vehicle was going 77 miles in the speed zone they were unfamiliar with. Winding road, dark at night, drunk driver. My son was drunk. I'm confident the other 2 kids were drunk, but down in the South here in Georgia, I don't know if it's out there in California, Todd, as they did toxicology reports only on the 2 kids that died. Philip lost his life and the driver lost their lives. So they were speeding. They weren't wearing seatbelts. They were drunk, driver had an option to come to a stop sign. On a T intersection beyond the stop sign was a church. The driver missed the stop sign. There were no skid marks. He hit an embankment at about 77 miles an hour, and ultimately it flipped the vehicle. And the vehicle, through various turns and twists, went about 450 feet in the air. It ended upside down. If you looked at it, you wouldn't understand how anybody survived it, quite frankly. But the one young man in the front passenger seat that wore a seatbelt took his seatbelt off. He was concussed and he ran for help. Philip was ejected outside the rear passenger window, not the window behind the driver. And he was found 15 feet from the vehicle lying. And in the accident report on page 8, my son's a stick figure with his name above his head and DOA for dead on arrival. The young girl in the back seat with him, I think the coroner wanted to make me feel a little bit better about all this. He said, we think because of Philip's sheer size and physical conditioning that she followed him out, and that probably protected her enough that it saved her life, although she was read her last rites. And the driver was found suspended in the air through his door, which was ajar through the driver's side door. And he's also a stick figure, bent over with his name and DOA also. So, Todd, quite frankly, God's will for me made it very clear that what are you going to do with this? And I went for a run the morning after Philip passed away. It was about 6:30 in the morning at a place here that borders Marietta and Roswell, Georgia, called Lita Thompson Park. Being a male, I'm not that smart. I didn't take my phone with me. I left it in the van. And I went for about a 3-mile run in this wooded area that was just beautiful, and the sun was coming up after a night of no sleep, and started crying, probably yelling things out loud.
Yep.
And as if God was right there looking at me, and Philip with his big face smiling at me right next to me, and Philip saying, Dad, it's going to be all right. And I yelled at Philip saying, what do you mean it's going to be all right? You're gone, son. What did you do? Why did you make these decisions? I had God look at me and say, what are you going to do with this? And God and Philip put on my heart, Todd, to start thinking of words, character-based words that describe Philip. And I ran and cried and yelled. And I went back to a Starbucks that was very important to Philip I, because he met an incredible 10-year-old girl at the time named Bailey Moody. And if your audience now goes and Google Bailey Moody, that you'll find out she's a freshman at the University of Alabama, Philip's arch rival. But she's also the youngest member of the U.S. Women's Paralympic wheelchair basketball team. And we met her because she was going to make a decision on what surgery she's going to have when they were going to remove the lower portion of her right leg. And we had found out that Philip was her favorite player at Auburn, number 43. I went back to that Starbucks and took out the recycled napkins and just started on every single napkin words that describe Philip. Athlete, Christian, funny, goofy, big, caring, giving. And I wadded him up, got back in the van, and realized I had about 90 texts and voice messages waiting from me from my wife and 3 daughters. Quite frankly, I think they feared I might have been outside harming myself. And I've got a special relationship with my kids, and my girls know I say this all the time. I apologize. I'm getting emotional on this here 5 years later. Philip was my best friend. The relationship that a father and a son have is something unique. I've got the greatest relationship collectively and individually with my 3 daughters. So they understand what I say is my best friend. And I went home with those napkins, and I told my daughter, Ann, showed them to her. I wadded them up and already put them on my home office desk. She said, Dad, what are you going to do with those? I said, Ann, I don't know yet, but we've got to do something. And ultimately what it's led to, Todd, is a curriculum we're very proud of called 43 Lessons to Legacy. And you work with coaches and athletes all the time. I was blessed to play Division III sports, 3 of the 4 kids, Division I athletes, all 4 high school athletes. And I've seen a lot of coaches that get kids bigger, faster, and stronger. They light up the scoreboard in their respective sport. They run a great practice, but I think sometimes they fall short of impressing upon character development and faith development of their kids, their student athletes. And that's what this curriculum is all about.
Mike, thank you, man. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I don't know, as a father, having to talk about this, how you get through it. The reason why I wanted you to come on today is because I know Philip's legacy is continuing today 6 years later, because of your passion and your relationship with him. This morning when I was doing some research before the show, I was in tears thinking about you and Mary and Amy and Ann and Abby, and like, man, what if that's my son? What if that's Luke or Brady? What if that was McKenna? And I think any parent listening in right now, as you're out for a walk, you're working out, you're in the car, you probably feel the same emotion. Like, man, he made one bad decision. And, as you've mentioned before, this wasn't about, being drunk. It was about making a bad choice. And kids make choices, adults make choices all the time. And, he had to pay the ultimate price. And I want to say thank you because of what your foundation has done in the last 6 years. And I'd love to hear more about the Lutzie 43 Foundation, because I said to Melanie, if that was my kid, I would do the same thing you're doing. I would take the Impact Foundation that I have, and I'd make it about my child. And how do we bring awareness? How do we bring awareness to kids and athletes and adults? And, these kids, I think sometimes you just don't realize the consequences of the choices and decisions we make every day. And it'll never be me. We all say that. It'll never be my son or daughter. It'll never be me if you're the kid. And sure enough, Philip, who was that All-American kid, two-time captain at a SEC school, stud athlete, great kid, and it is him. And man, Mike, I just want to say thank you for continuing his legacy, because I get choked up hearing about Philip, and you and I haven't met yet. I heard this from our friend Scott Costner because of a charity run that he went to in Philip's honor. So from the bottom of my heart, I say thank you. And what you're doing is certainly impacting a lot of people listening in right now. Tell me more about Lutzie's 43 Foundation. What is it? What do you do? And how are you keeping Philip's legacy alive?
Yeah, Todd, thank you for your kind words, first of all. And I'll give you the same guidance I give every other family out there with kids. No matter how frustrated you may get with your kids on a given day, or they do something boneheaded, give them a hug, because you know what? You may never get a chance to do it again. And that's what's with Philip. And there's so many lessons that came out of this. Quite frankly, I think God had used Philip for his time on earth, and but he's not done using Philip, and that's what really motivated the foundation. Philip did live a good life. He never got grounded. He doesn't mean, I tell people, don't believe me, he was not a saint. Where none of us are saints. His sister would tell you the few times he'd get to come home while he's at college, if he couldn't find the remote to the TV right away, or he couldn't find his Toy Story CD, he was certainly not a kind person. But and I also tell this to people, if my son was just a good football player at a major school, we wouldn't have a foundation. But because Philip was a good person off the field, he did things for others. That's why we have this foundation. So I think literally within 45 days of Philip passed away, I had a local high school coach here called me and said, Mike, we don't know each other all that well, and I hope I'm not rude calling you so close to you losing Philip, but we've already gone through the 3 days of acclimation practice here for the fall season of 14. And there was a party that I found out close to 100% of my team went to, and probably 60 to 70% were drinking at it. Could you come talk to the team? And I did. And then we had we got a college program here. Most of your followers probably have heard of, called Kennesaw State University. It's one of the fastest growing schools in the country.
Sure.
They play what I call still 1AA football.
Yep.
Brian Bohannon at the time, Philip was getting recruited, was the offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech. And Brian called me and said, Mike, could you come talk to my team? We've got this transition year, first year of college football, where we can't play games. And I know my guys need to hear your message, because they're going to think they can do stuff on a Friday night they couldn't the day before a game, and we don't have games this year. And then we kind of got blessed, to be honest with you, when you start talking about names. Philip wanted nothing to do with going to University of Georgia, but Mark Rick recruited Philip, and Mark Rick called me and said, Mike, can you come talk to University of Georgia football? And then Dabo Sweeney and Clemson, who was recruiting Philip, can you come talk to us? And we were blessed that Tom Rinaldi with ESPN picked up on all this, and he reached out to Auburn University Athletics, and they got to us and said, Mike, ESPN would like to do a game day feature piece. And I noticed my son's hands were not only because he was the feature of the story. That game day feature piece aired in the fall of 2014 when game day and ESPN was broadcasting from Tuscaloosa.
Mm.
And the game day feature piece is about an Auburn tight end on an Alabama campus. That's my son's humor. That's my son reaching through, again, saying, Dad,
I love it. I love it.
Run with this thing. It's going to be okay.
Mm.
It's going to be okay. And that's what really started this foundation. And we quickly did this 43 lessons to legacy curriculum. We wanted a simple lesson where we came up with these words that describe Philip's character. And we went to people like Tom Rinaldi and Bo Jackson, who's a board member for us, who's a former Auburn player, obviously, and
wow,
and Nick Saban, Gus Malzahn, Gene Chizik, and a bunch of people that your listening audience wouldn't know about. But we said, hey, we want you to take one of these two words that describe our son, and if you agree with one of them, would you consider authoring a 500 word less use of that word in a story between you and Philip? And if you would you help us identify applications that student or student athletes can apply to life and that their coaches or mentors can apply to life? And would you also pick out a scripture passage that ties into the word? And would you pick out a quote? And I'll be honest with you, I met with Nick Saban, and Nick recruited Philip. He coached against Philip. Heck, Philip got known, quite frankly, as a sophomore. He had the game-winning touchdown in the 2010 Iron Bowl when Auburn went on to win a national championship, and they fell behind 24-0. Philip had a game-winning touchdown to win that game. And I didn't know if Nick would write in the curriculum, quite frankly, but I went there prepared with a couple words. And for your audience to know who Nick Saban is, Nick said to me, Mike, I'm in. And I want to write about the word discipline because Philip, that was one of his character traits. But Nick just nailed it down. He said, Mike, I'll tell you what, for whatever reason, Philip decided not to be disciplined that weekend. It took his life. And he's right. So Nick Saban is an author in our curriculum. That curriculum led to a scholarship program that we call the Prepared for Life, PFL. That stands for Mary and the girls and I and our family, Philip Francis Lutzenkirchen. But it's Prepared for Life Character Scholarship. And everything we do is around 43. We give out a $4,300 scholarship to the scholarship awardees that have to submit a written application, a mentor letter of reference, and their official transcript. Eligible students are juniors and seniors in high school, undergraduate and graduate schools and college. And it's good at any school in the country. And we're proud. We've given out over 60 of these scholarships in the last 3.5 years. And we'll continue to do it. And you think about, Scott, what's going on. I know you've had some podcasts on how to succeed with your business during this unique, chaotic time of COVID-19. We're proud that our board unanimously voted back in April that we're going to give out scholarships this past May. We always do it the first weekend in May, and we awarded 15 scholarships.
Jeez.
So those are a couple of the things that we've done. But more importantly, my son, he loved kids with special needs. He loved kids with cancer. And there's multiple stories of Philip giving back in that area. And we still do things like that. We do a thing called an adapted PE elementary school field day here in Cobb County. We've got 68 public elementary schools, and we already do a high school prom. And the county already does a high school prom for special needs kids. We already do a middle school extravaganza. We found out there was nothing special being done for these students that were born uniquely different than most of us.
Yep.
Kids that had physical ailments or mental ailments that need our assistance on a daily basis. And they're incredible staffs that raise them and teach them every day when they go to school. So we do what we call this adapted PE field day, where we, for 2 hours, put these kids K through 5 on a football field. They go through 20 different stations, and it's a phenomenal experience. But we had a very pivotal moment in the history of the foundation. This is where I really think your audience, this is where it plays into all of us. We looked at things, and somebody asked me 2 key questions in March of 2018. They said, Mike, and they had not met Philip. They said, are you concerned about Philip's relevancy? And are you happy and proud of what the foundation has accomplished? And this individual went on far enough to say, Mike, I know you've done a lot of things in Georgia and Alabama. Philip lived in Georgia. He played ball in Alabama. And he knows I've been speaking across the country. But those are 2 great questions I'd already been thinking about. And I thought about that. I just gave a talk last week, first post-pandemic high school talk, 350 kids at a private high school. And if I do my math right, those seniors in high school were in 7th grade when my son lost his life. The freshmen in that audience were in 4th grade. The further I get out of the Southeast Conference, heck, I bet you people in San Diego don't even know where Auburn is, let alone what their colors are. Certainly don't know our story or Philip. How relevant will he remain? As this story gets further away from he lost his life on June 29 and 14, how do we keep it relevant? So we did some research, and the reality of it is there is no nationally recognized symbol that, Todd, you'd look at in San Diego, a follower of yours in Seattle, Washington, or New York, or Florida would look at it. And if I ask them the question is, what's the symbol that you look at that triggers you not to be a distracted or an impaired driver? And I get a lot of blank stares. I get a lot of ums, and ultimately I get, well, that's a phone. And I say, well, you mean, is that a phone in a circle with a slash through it? Yeah, that's it. I said, really? The number 2 distraction for any female driver is putting on makeup. The number 2 distraction for your son, Luke, as a 17-year-old driver, number 3 distraction, I'm sorry, is Luke trying to drive there in San Diego thinking he can drive with Jack's or McDonald's or something in his lap. Here's the reality. There is no national symbol that any of us would look at that would trigger us not to be a distracted or an impaired driver. That covers all of the gamut. In our national government, who I work with, and our local governments who I work with, I'm proud of them, but they do programs such as click it or ticket, drive sober, get pulled over, you text, you pay. And here's the reality. The first 6 months of the year in this country, so January 1st through June 30th, which incorporates about 90 days of the pandemic, the total miles driven by us U.S. citizens is down 17%, yet our deaths are up almost 20% on the roadway. It's due to faster driving on less populated roads. It's due to more people drinking and then driving. And it's a continued use of distracted driving and not wearing seatbelts. So we looked at this and said, hey, what can we do about it? And I was arrogant enough to say, you know what? What if we put a 43 on a key that looks like it would start a car, open a door? What if we created a countdown? So what we did is we created what we call 43 key seconds. And your listeners can go to Amazon right now and Google Lutzie 43, and they'll find this program out there. We said, what if we took a key and put 43 key seconds on one side, and the opposite, we said, what if we put 43 in the word TO, so 43 too distracted free? And what if we interweave those two slogans on a lanyard? Everybody loves lanyards for some reason.
Yeah.
And more importantly, what if we took and created a countdown card that looks like a credit card, same type of material, and it basically says to your audience, take 43 key seconds before you start your car, whether you're a new driver, an old driver, driving a Mustang, a pickup truck, a semi-truck, and you say, hey, first and foremost, do I have a clear head? Then you go to clear hands, clear eyes, and then we do tie you to the national slogan of click it or ticket by saying click it. And what does a clear head mean? It means I do an analysis before I turn that car and say, am I drug impaired, alcohol impaired? Am I emotionally impaired? Am I fatigued? And as probably as importantly as any, am I technology impaired? Do I think I can drive with my phone in my hand, read a text? These young kids think they can be cool with Facebook Live. They read an email. So that's, make sure you got a clear head. That's clear hands. Your phone should be on the dash or in a cup holder. And not every state has a hands-free law. Here's what I tell people all the time. You don't need to live in a state where your government's created a hands-free law or you violate it. Create your own personal law that you're not going to drive distracted with that phone in your hand. It can wait.
Yep. Amen.
So then you go clear hands. Have I set my dashboard, whether it's my CD player, my GPS, whatever it may be? Then you go, do I have clear eyes? Are my eyes focused and ready to be on the road? Have I told all my passengers, I'm not driving out of here until you put your seatbelt on, even in the back seat?
Yep.
So it's clear hand, clear eyes, clear hand, clear heads, clear eyes, and then we do say, click it. We think if people will do that across this country, it's going to start to reduce the number of crashes, injuries, and most important, fatalities. And your audience needs to know, these aren't Mike Lutzenkirchen or Lutzie 43 stats. These are government, scientifically based stats. And here's what really should catch your audience. Whether you're a 15-year-old new permitted driver or an 18-year-old, the number one cause of death for our high school students, even during this COVID-19, is not suicide. It's not drug overdoses. It is distracted driving. our college campuses, anybody in college, the number one cause of death, again, is not opiate addiction overdoses, drug overdoses. It is not suicide. It is a combination of distracted and impaired driving.
Mm.
And here's the real catch where we've gotten so much smarter. The number one cause of death in corporate America, regardless of industry, is referred to as motor vehicle crashes. So think about that. Anybody from 15 permanent behind the wheel of a vehicle to 70, 80 years old, in that whole gamut in between, the number one chance that you could lose your life happens to be from poor decisions behind the wheel of a vehicle.
Mm.
Our government gives grants out, and I love grants to help our foundation, but I refuse to do what the government wants me to do, which is, Mike, go talk about distracted driving, or go talk about impaired driving, or go talk about seatbelt use. Hey, my son wasn't killed in a compartment. It was impaired driving. He was a passenger. There was distractions involved. So the message is very clear. We tell high school kids all the time, I don't have to be smart to know how many years of driving experience you have. If you're a high school kid, there's no more than 3. You can't be on the roads driving after midnight. There's nothing safe. The number of drunk drivers after midnight in this country escalates after midnight. You got to be firm and strong with your passengers who you love and say, put your seatbelt on. I'm not going. You should see a high school, all school assembly when you ask them, raise your hand if you know what distracted driving is. Everyone raises their hand. Then you get a little personal and say, raise your hand if the last week, if you're a licensed driver, have you been a distracted driver? It's like watching popcorn. You know, that right arm comes up near the ear. They look around. Very few are raising up real high. All of a sudden, people say it's up. 70% of the kids are distracted drivers. Here's the one that gets your listening audience that are adults. When you ask these high school kids, raise your hand if mom and dad are typically distracted drivers when you're in the vehicle with them. 100% of the hands go up. This is an epidemic. This is going to go well beyond COVID-19. I'm not trying to diminish what's going on. The loss of lives.
You're right. You're right.
Terrible. My wife's an RN, and she's lost a patient due to COVID. But what we're trying to do is take my son's life and the loss of it and do something about it. We call it 43 key seconds. And I'll tell you what's really powerful is when we go to high school and that administration or some booster says, Mike, we want to put the logo of the high school on one side of the key. We want to put the logo of the high school on the lanyard. And we want to put the logo of the high school on the countdown card. Man, kids get it. When they see their logo on something and they hear this message, I think it starts to hit home and say, you know, that's me. I'm an athlete. I'm in band. I'm in Spanish club. I go to that high school, they get it. And then what was really cool to us is all of a sudden some corporations come to me and say, Mike, we have employee safety programs. We have employee safety behind the wheel programs. We have a dinner. We have an event where we bring their families in. We need you to be our keynote speaker. Can we put our logo on those products? Absolutely. And then they say, Mike, here's what's really cool. We want to give back to the communities we serve. We have employees who have kids at local high schools. Can we fund your talk, and can we fund 43 second keys, countdown card, and lanyards for those high schoolers? We'll tri-brand them. We'll put the high school logo on the key and the card, on the lanyard. We'll put the corporation like Nucor Steel did on the lanyard and the card. So now we're helping out corporations want to make their environments, their communities safer by delivering our talk called 43 Lessons to Legacy. What legacy are you leaving? And tying in 43 key seconds.
Wow.
And again, I feel like it, Todd. I feel like the passion raises in me when I talk about this.
Yeah, sure. You can tell. It sure does, Mike. Sure does.
I got to tell you, it's easy for me to pull students that don't want to listen. Believe me, I was a 15, 18-year-old knucklehead male at one point in my life.
We all were.
I thank my parents for raising me right to respect adults, respect coaches. Man, it's pretty powerful when you can get some kids that aren't paying attention to this and you stare them down and you look at them and say, let me ask you this. You tell this whole audience what it would be like for you to do one of two things. Either A, hold up to your friends and say, put your seatbelt on, or no, I'm not letting you drink and drive, or I'm not going to do this or that, versus you saying to them, I've got to go to a funeral today because my best friend lost their life. It's an impactful message. It's a message for kids to have a conversation with their parents, for parents to have a conversation with their kids. because I got to tell you, it sucks. It sucks. It sucks sitting here in my home office, seeing pictures of my family, knowing that the next wedding we go to of one of Philip's friends or my daughter's friends, because my kids are all of ages 26 to 33, and it's that age when we go to weddings.
Yep.
And we get to that point where it's a groom and his mother dance, and I got to watch my wife well up because she won't get to do it. And I watch my daughters who don't get to see their brother be an uncle to their kids. It just sucks. And in most of these deaths that occur, and we'll see 11 deaths on our roads today. It's a number, it's a stat. Most of them are avoidable. And the message on this to your listening audience as adults, you got to set an example because kids watch us. They watch you take that text. They watch you text back. They watch you read an email. Nothing's too important. We're proving it. We can work effectively from our home during this pandemic. You can wait. You can become your own distracted free driver, hands-free driver. You don't need a government telling you to do it. I'm telling you, the stats are there. And again, people have said to me before, but Mike, your son didn't die from a distracted driving accident. No, he died from poor decisions one weekend where he wasn't smart enough or cognizant enough not to get in the back of that vehicle. And it was completely avoidable. And people always ask me, are you disappointed, Philip? And I say, absolutely not. And if you want to push me, I'll say, you know what? I am to a degree. I wish he would have taken all those keys because I know he was the biggest personality in that room of those 13 kids, and he would have hit them. And you wouldn't even know who I am. And Scott Costner wouldn't have come to our annual 5K run.
That's right.
And by the way, we have runners run virtually every first Saturday of August. We had 13 runners in San Diego last year run virtually with our foundation. So I don't know. And Todd, listen to some of your podcasts. I think I've dominated the volume. I don't mean to do that, but it happens.
The way it should be. I say thank you again. Because you talk about legacy. You talk about impact. I mean, this is the impact show. Impact is legacy, and legacy is, I would say, live a life worth telling, a story about what's your story. And Mike, I want to thank you for being so courageous and strong in a time where you probably sometimes feel so dang weak as a dad, as a husband, and you persevered the last 6 years, and it's obviously still raw, will be to the day you die. I just say thank you as a man, as a brother in Christ, and a man of faith. Is thank you for persevering. You probably don't even know the impact you've had in the last 6 years, and we're just meeting today for the first time, and I'm hoping there's thousands of people that share this message. I don't care if you're a kid. I don't care if you're an adult. Man, this message has come at the price of someone's life, and that's Philip Lutzenkirchen's life. And Mike, his dad, is here today. With the foundation, if someone wanted more information, wanted to partake in one of your activities, wanted to donate, wanted to potentially someday apply to that scholarship, where do they find that? What's the website?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving us that opportunity there. It's www.lutzie43.org. It's L-U-T as in Tom, Z as in zebra, I-E. So Lutzie43.org. And again, I give the credit there. We've got a wonderful PR group called Night Edie Sports Group. And they believe that sports change the world. And I do too. They're in Birmingham. They manage that website. They update it for us. I think they've done a great job. But you can learn about Philip, the foundation, our scholarship program, our curriculum, 5K race, a golf fundraising event we do. All of it there at Lutzie43.org.
Yeah. And Mike, I'm just curious for you, is this a full-time job for you, or is this kind of like a side thing that, I mean, obviously it's your purpose now in life. It's probably what wakes you up, but how much of your time in a week is devoted? I'm just curious to your foundation.
It's a great question. I left IBM in 2010 on my own accord, had a great company to work for, ethically and character strong wise. I was involved in a couple startups, tried to continue with the second startup after Philip passed away. And my wife knows me like the back of her hand. And Thanksgiving weekend of 2016, she said, "You seem not like yourself.
Yeah.
What's going on?" This and that. I told her, and she constantly says, as my girls do, when you go on vacation, stop thinking about the foundation. You got to separate at times. I don't do a very good job of that.
Yep.
Mary said, "Mike," and I just told her, I said, "Mary, we're not getting some things done with this foundation we need to get done." She said, "Well, then quit the startup. We'll figure things out. We'll make it. We're good. Foundation, I'm proud to tell people, is financially strong. That doesn't mean we won't take donations, but one of the things I'm not very good at is asking for money, quite frankly. But we tie in on November 19th of every year. We will do a 43-day campaign. The first Thursday, November 19th, we will do a 43-day year-end campaign as an outreach fundraiser. You can make donations through our website. What I would encourage your fans, find out about us. And you know what? Everybody can drive a 5K. Most people can walk it. A lot of us can run it. We will do a 5K the first Saturday in August again. It'll be our 7th annual one on August 7th of next year. So we have runners run virtually across the world. We had 13 runners in San Diego, as I mentioned. 2 years ago, we had 15 runners in Afghanistan run with the U.S. Marines. So I would just Google Philip. Google Philip. You'll find so many things about him. Look up 43 key seconds.
Awesome.
I think as parents, as aunts and uncles, we owe it to ourselves to be role models behind the wheel of a car when we've got kids in the car.
Yeah.
It's going to save lives.
Brother, you are so right on. And I Googled Philip prior to our show, and I got to tell you, man, 6 years after his passing, he is still living because of you and Mary and Amy and Ann and Abby. And I don't know them. I don't know you, but give them a big hug for me for what you're doing. I know it takes a team effort. I know it takes a family effort, and I know it's all in. And you probably, in some weird way, probably feel more purpose driven than ever before because of Philip. I got two final questions for you. And it's more about, if I was in your shoes, I'd probably be having conversations every day with my son, Luke, or Brady. If you had that moment where today you could talk to Philip, my two questions are this. What do you think Philip would say to you today? And what would you say to Philip?
Yeah, Todd, it's interesting. I get a little variation of those questions. I don't know that I answer it this way. I'm going to answer it two ways. And one is if I had Philip here today, having not gone through what we had, he'd be a 29-year-old, vibrant young man, probably be married, have a great job, make a difference in the world.
Think he'd be a coach?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Philip, keep impacting the people you touch and don't ever lose that spirit, because you got an incredible spirit.
Yep.
He would ask me, "What's up, Dad? How you doing, man? How's Mom? How are the girls? When am I going to see you again?" Because I don't think he'd be living by us.
Yeah.
But if I asked the question, if he were to come back to me today, and God gave me one last chance, and I'll share this kind of in closing with you. This question fell upon my heart probably 2 years ago. So you're talking 3 to 4 years into the journey. I was driving one day, and I had this all the time. I saw 43, something 8:43 or 2:43 on the clock in the car. I saw 43 an exit, an orange blue sky. It makes me think of Philip right away. A Need to Breathe song. And it was as if God said to me, he goes, "I'm going to ask you a question, Mike. You got to answer it right away. Your two options are, you don't get any other details. Philip is going to live 23 years and 29 days. Your options are either you get him or you don't." I started to think about that question myself. What kind of question is that, God? What are you telling me? What's going to happen that I'm going to lose Philip at 23 years and 29 days? And I would tell you hands down, and I asked that question to Mary. Mary looked at me very oddly like, "Mike, why that question?" Because I said to her, I take every 23 years and 29 days over and over. He took us on a magical ride. God gifted us with a young man named Philip Francis to raise on this earth for 23 years and 29 days. I wouldn't pass it up. I go back to your audience again.
Mm.
Hug your kids. Hug your kids.
Mm.
But he'd ask me, and he'd say to me, Dad, he wouldn't ask me a question. He'd say to me, Dad, man, when you get up here, we're going to wrestle again. I know you're going to kiss me on the side of the cheek. I know we're going to hug. And I'm just going to tell you, well done, Dad. Well done.
Well, wow. Mike, well done is right. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and for all of those who are listening in right now for the journey that you've been through. And I know it's been one hell of a journey, and you didn't choose this journey. It chose you. And brother, I'll keep you in my prayers and your entire family in my prayers. And I thank you for sharing Philip's story and legacy with us. You talk about impact. It's amazing what Philip Lutzenkirchen has impacted so many people, not only up until 2014, but obviously until right now in 2020, how because of you and Mary and the kids and the foundation and all that you're doing, how it's impacting so many people. So Mike, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for sharing your heart with us today. Truly, truly inspiring. Thank you, brother.
Todd, thank you for what you do. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Wow. Oh, wow. Woo! That was as deep of an episode as I've ever had on the Impact Show. Thank you for listening in. Mike Lutzenkirchen, the father of Philip Lutzenkirchen. I can't imagine that being me. Can't imagine that being a parent, basically eulogizing your son or daughter and sharing that. Hey, man, 6 years later, Philip's legacy still lives because of Mike and Mary's mission and purpose in life. My friends, all of those assets are in the show notes. If you want to go check out 43 Key Seconds, if you want to go check out the foundation, certainly go support them, whether you live around the Atlanta area or you'd like to do something virtually. You can certainly do that. But you talk about impact, you talk about legacy. It certainly teaches you about the fragility of life. And I really, really treasured that conversation to hear about the poignancy of, I keep hearing, hug your kids, hug your kids. It doesn't matter how much success they've had or not, hug your kids. And kids, the message from Mike there, certainly in making decisions in life and choices. We always talk about choices in life, and sometimes we think we're invincible when we're 15 or 18 or 23 years old. And heck, sometimes when you're 50 years old, you think you're invincible. But it's all about choices and the decisions we make every single day. I want you all to know that I love you and I appreciate you for listening in. Hey, if this was to be my last podcast, what I would say is this. Each and every one of us, we all have a life worth telling a story about. And whether you live to your 23, 43, 83, or 103, we never want to take a day for granted. And I want to say thank you for all that you are. Please share this episode today. I know it was emotional. I know it was heavy, but this is life. This is life. We talk about impact. We talk about legacy. We talk about living that life we're telling a story about. This is what it's all about. And this is why I do the podcast. I love you guys. Continue to maximize every single day. Train hard, eat right, live inspired, and don't forget to create impact today.